Është i njohur si emër dhe punon në 7 ditë të javës. Është laboratori Oliv. Ju mirëpret çdo ditë nga ora 7 deri ora 20. Në Oliv kryen të gjitha llojet e analizave të gjakut përmes aparaturave më moderne dhe stafit më profesional.
Jemi në laboratorin më modern në Kosovë. Ky është laboratori Oliv.
Beso në më të mirët. Oliv.
Universum po vjen me shumë programe të reja. Infermieri, fizioterapi, estetik dhe higjien dentare, dizajn grafik, dizajn mode, gazetari digjitale, siguri kibernetike, shkenca kompjuterike, biznes dhe menaxhment, juridik, shkenca politike, gjuhë angleze, gjuhë gjermane. Apliko online për studime. Universum, universi mundësive.
Miq të Gazetës Infokus dhe Televizionit Dukagjini. Konakun po e fillojmë ndryshe kësaj radhe, për shkak se kemi një intervistë ekskluzive. Me një mik të veçantë dhe special që vjen nga përtej Atlantikut. Një mik i veçantë që dha një kontribut shumë të madh për shqiptarët dhe shtetin e Kosovës. Vjen ekskluzivisht në konak dhe për herë të parë për një televizion shqiptar, ish zëvendës Drejtori Kombëtar Politik i Fushatës presidenciale të ish Presidentit amerikan Clinton, Christopher Hyland. Ky është personazhi për të cilin ish Presidenti amerikan Clinton thotë se e njohu me shqiptarët dhe çështjen e Kosovës, për fatin e të cilës do të vendoste më vonë dhe ku do të vendoste edhe për bombardimet ndaj Serbisë, që ndalen luftën e përgjakshme dhe sollën deri te pavarësia e Kosovës. Në një intervistë të cilën do ta japim në 2 pjesë, Hyland flet për raportet me shqiptarët. Njohjen e tij me njërin ndër figurat më të rëndësishme të historisë shqiptare, me fanolin e madh. Se sa ka qenë i lidhur me shqiptarët dhe çështjen e Kosovës, e tregon edhe momenti kur Hyland, me lët në sy, kujton momentin e shpalljes së pavarësisë së Kosovës. Në ndisni në këtë pjesë të parë të intervistës me mikun e madh të shqiptarëve Christopher Hyland.
Mr. Hyland, thank you for accepting us in a short notice and in quite busy agenda.
I have had a busy agenda, but I'm very happy to be interviewed by you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to have you in this interview. I would like to start this interview about your first relations with Albanian in the United States.
Well,
Why did it happen?
My first relations with Albanians was Anthony Athenas, who owned a restaurant near my parents' house. And then there was an older gentleman there by the name of Fan Noli, who was, of course, a very prominent Albanian. And as a child, I spoke with him a number of times, and of course with Anthony Athenas, who went to Europe with my parents on trade and travel commissions.
So you knew Fanoli?
Yes.
How was he?
He was a very, very sweet, pleasant, engaging person who had a certain reserve and a certain dignity and spoke with a young child. And when I say child, I would have been 10 or 12 years old and 13 and 14 in that sort of age group. I don't exactly remember when he died, but it was in my youth. But I was a rather precocious child and spoke with everybody. And at my parents' table and everywhere we went, there were politicians and leaders.
So your first contact with the Albanians was since your childhood?
Absolutely.
And how was your perception about the Albanians, and how did you first contact with other Albanians that were lobbying for Albanians' cause?
Well, in the 1980s, especially, there was a concerted effort to lobby Congress for Albania. In the 1960s, I went to school with Bill Clinton at Georgetown University. And in the late 80s, around 1990, I began to lay the groundwork to help him run for president. And I went and purchased 30 ethnic newspapers and one of them was Illyria, and I began calling up all the leaders in the newspapers of the Albanian, Macedonian, Montenegrin, Kosovan community.
Who was the first American, or the first American company, or a political group that you started lobbying for Albanians' cause, especially for Kosovo's cause?
Well, in particular, I found names such as the Bedici brothers, as an example, or Bruno, who has the famous restaurant on 58th Street, numerous others. I just began calling them and trying to create and encourage an Albanian American or Kosovo American committee for Bill Clinton. But real progress happened when I contacted Jim Gemma.
And with Jim Gemma, you started lobbying for the cause, for the situation here to inform in the White House now after the Clinton was elected as the president of the United States. What was his first perception when you talked about Albanians and Kosovo cause?
Well, I want to back up for a minute, if you allow me to, because the story is a little more nuanced and it's important that the story be heard. I called up Jim Gemma and I said, Jim, and I knew of Jim because he's in the design industry as one of our nation's top contractors. And I said, Jim, we need to work together on helping to elect President Clinton. Jim was already just recently had become friends with Senator Dole. And I said, Jim, you need to send folks eventually out to campaign for the president when he is in his primary. You need to come to every event with other leaders of the Kosovo community. And you need to raise funds for the primary period and the campaign later on, of course. And I set up a situation where, as much as possible, Jim and other Albanian Americans, Kosovo Americans, had contact with the Clintons. For instance, I had a dinner for Hillary Clinton. I sat Jim right next to Hillary. I had a group of Albanian and Kosovo Americans come to meet Clinton and George Stephanopoulos at another time. I went to speak at rallies outside of the United Nations. I went to the Bronx. I spent 2 hours or more with President Rugova. I mean, I created the first paper in the campaign on Kosovo. And I think if you're doing politics, you also go around the center and you allow the Kosovo community to themselves begin to interact. So the real story here is the degree to which I approached the Kosovo community, which had nothing to do with Clinton. He was a distant governor who had several scandals that were creating problems even before he became a big candidate. And so the important thing, and I think it's crucial to this story, is that the diaspora, led by Jim Gemma and helped by numerous other individuals, set up in Washington, for instance, a national committee of Albanian Americans and Kosovo Americans for Bill Clinton. That then led to other things, which led to my, for instance, at the second Clinton Foreign Affairs speech, going up to then Governor Clinton and saying, here's a list of names. There's Kosovo. May I recommend that you suggest that Kosovo be recognized, this is 91, 92, recognized for independence.
This certain point, because this is a crucial thing to mention and the public must know. What was his reaction when you mentioned that this is Kosovo?
Well,
and this has to be recognized.
Well, because Bush was not recognizing them, and Bush was the seated president, and I had analyzed in my mind that if Kosovo was not recognized, there could be a disaster that happened there based on all that I had learned. And unfortunately, in that speech, then Governor Clinton did not mention, did not include the recognition or even the thought of discussion of recognition of Kosovo. And by the way, I want to add something. I was not lobbying for Kosovo. What I was lobbying for, not lobbying, what I was working for is the inclusion of Kosovo Americans at the height of American presidential politics. Because if they're positioned at that height, then they have a voice and they can speak for themselves. although I personally came to identify with the cause of Kosovo, totally. I identified it. To me, you have in life times, the French have an expression, il faut engager la vie. You must engage life. And in my opinion, this was a life and death situation. And not long after the president, the then governor, did not include that in his speech, I then sent a long memo to him and all the powers that be saying that if you do not address this now, there will be total disaster in the future. And I was completely prescient on that issue.
Because you were closely informed about what was going here on the ground.
I was totally informed. And also, please understand, I studied at the School of Foreign Service. I went to boarding school in Switzerland. As a schoolboy, I traveled through the Eastern Balkans as a schoolboy. So I was very aware. And when I got older, I realized and became even more aware of the story of Fanoli, who I met when I was younger. And I became more aware of who Anthony Athenis was.
Then we come to the moment when you organized the first meeting of President Rugova with President Clinton.
Well, let me again say a few. Go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to ask you if you can recall details from that meeting. How important was that meeting for Kosovo Albanians and for Kosovo leader politics to meet with the President Clinton? Because that defined the incoming situations and the events about Kosovo.
If we can once again back up just a little bit here. During the middle of the campaign, I flew to Atlanta, where I had dinner with the candidate in the height of the campaign. And during that dinner, I discussed several issues with him. I discussed, for instance, the issue in Ireland. I discussed issues relating to
President Clinton.
With President Clinton face-to-face at dinner across the table, or was he sitting next to me? I can't remember. But the point is that I discussed during that time in Atlanta the issue of Ireland, the issue of India, the issue of Kosovo. And indeed, I have the memo, I have papers that back up all of these things that I sent to Bruce Lindsay that was a recap of that meeting that is specifically involving the issue of Kosovo. Now, I then proceeded along all times during the transition when the president won. I did everything humanly possible to try to effect meetings between President Rugova, the State Department, Warren Christopher, this one, that, the other. And I also, at that time, had put into place people like Jim Gemma, who became very individual, independent actors. And Jim Gemma, I'm giving a speech today at the University of Business and Technology with quotes from Jim Gemma, in which he very clearly says that the process towards independence would not have happened if it weren't for Clinton and Dole and Chris and myself. And the point is that my approach was to put Jim and others in position to do these things. So I cannot myself address what might or might not have happened during a meeting that might or might not have happened between Rugova and President Clinton. I was not there at that meeting. But what I did was advocate that meetings of all kinds with Brokowski, with Rugova, be done.
I would like to ask about the meeting of President Rugova and President Clinton.
But I've just said I can't address, I was not at that meeting.
No, my point is, how important was that meeting in internationalization of the issue of Kosovo?
Well, let me say this much to you, that the complete interaction of the Kosovo American diaspora community with the Clinton campaign, and in Clinton's own words, Clinton writes that what Christopher Hyland did substantially contributed to my winning the presidency and giving unprecedented access to ethnic communities in the White House. That's pretty much the words. And what I did was give that access, fought for that access, but whatever recognition that took place step by step with each Clinton individually, with folks like George Stephanopoulos, with others, of which we have pictures of all of this, by the way. All of this combined created a body of events that might have led to various meetings taking place. I cannot exactly comment on what transpired in those meetings, except to the extent that there was nothing when I began, nothing, zero. There was no Albanian support or Kosovo support for Bill Clinton. No one had anything to do with this level of presidential politics. And indeed, I did such a good job that when Jim Gemma had a conversation with Senator Dole said, listen, he basically said, I'm not running for president now, so therefore, you've got Bush there, but you better swim in the Clinton campaign. He might turn out to be pretty good, and I would assume from that, based on what Jim might have told him, that this Christopher Hyland is really doing a pretty aggressive job getting everybody together. If you were with me in the last 3 days here and ask all of these folks, I really connect people, bring people together, but I let folks speak their voice. Yeah. I allow them, I put them in place. If I were to introduce you to somebody, I would not control you. I would encourage you. And then if I wanted something done, I learned from my father, who was a great politician. He was chairman of the City Council of Salem. He was our town moderator. Dad, when he was interested in achieving something, went around the center and then allowed people to do.
Then we come to one of the most hardest times for Kosovo. 1998, the war has started. What was the impact of the Kosovo lobby and your advocacy to the highest levels to let them know what's going on the ground, even from the real voices of the Kosovo Albanians who were living and acting there in lobbying and informing American citizens what's going on? Did you have a role in that situation?
I did not per se have a role in that situation in the sense that I was not a leader in that situation. However, I did call the White House. I did meet with Sandy Berger twice, who was the National Security Advisor, in the White House in the lead up to those days. And I said, this is going to happen, Sandy, and you're going to have to be prepared to aggressively address this, and you've got to come down on what is the right situation. One of those events was during the state visit for President Kuchma of Ukraine. By the way, before that visit, I met privately with him and the First Lady of Ukraine and Hillary and Bill in a room in the White House. And I sat next to Sandy Berger, who, by the way, appeared next to me. I don't even think he was meant to be my official person sitting next to me, but he appeared there. And he and I had an hour and a half, 2-hour discussion in which 40 minutes had to do with Kosovo. And that was 1996, let's say. And then before that, and now that I think of it, subsequent to that, closer to the outbreak of hostilities, I said, no matter what happens, you're going to have to deal with this. And by the way, at the same time, during encounters with him, 1 or 2 in his office, I said, you're going to have to give Jerry Adams a visa. For instance, at that same state dinner, we sat next to each other. I said the talk of him not getting visa has to be stopped, and indeed 2 or 3 weeks later, he showed up. So my intervention in discussion with people is firm to the point, and it's clear. And I think folks came to realize that I was a clear thinker. They also knew that I wasn't paid for any of this. I wasn't lobbying. I was representing what was right and just, advocating for the good, rising to the occasion for the good. That's very powerful because, quite frankly, in the White House, if you're not connected to Wall Street, you are nobody, virtually nobody. Now, that's a general statement, but somehow there's a point, and I think you get it. I was advocating for a small people in a distant land against a power that had Russia connected to it, which is a nuclear power.
Yeah. We come to the situation after almost a year of war on the ground, hard negotiations that in certain point have failed to reach an agreement, we come to the moment when NATO intervened in Kosovo. How you felt when you heard the news, and where were you at that moment when NATO intervention happened?
Well, I was elated because I did this huge amount of work of putting everybody together. And without sort of saying, here I am, look at me, I did this. And then thereafter, I basically didn't hear anything from the Albanian community. I still continued on my own, regardless of all the things I did. By the way, when I say that, Jim and I remain friends. We've been friends ever since we met 35 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever it was. So Jim, but other than that friendship with Jim, and I encouraged Jim. Jim subsequently gave dinner for Bill Clinton and all this sort of great stuff. But when the situation arrived as it did, I was beyond elated. I looked at the newspapers and said, boy, I might not have been fully part of that particular event, that moment, but in my heart, I was like crying. And more important, when independence came, that was a really big deal for me. It was something, because you have to understand that I come from New England. My hometown had an altercation with the British at North Street before Lexington and Concord. Lafayette stopped in Marblehead, and in Salem, a block from where I live, we have Lafayette's Hall, where he was feted for what he did in the Revolution. The French came to the assistance. I wanted to participate in history to help found a nation, and it was really cool. It was very cool. Sorry.
And there is nothing to apologize, Mr. Ambassador.
I'm not an ambassador. I mean, I appreciate the honor you gave me, but I will tell you, there were forces that didn't want the Albanians anywhere near anything. I had to hold separate events because they were...
Mr. Hyland, your tears, your emotional situation now tells us a lot. How deeply in your heart you were connected with the Kosovo issue, Albanians issue, and in the name of all of our audience and all Albanians, I would really like, from the depth of my heart, to thank you for everything you did for our cause, for our Albanians, and for our issues that led to the independence. It was the greatest moment of our history as a Kosovars. So now we come to the situation when the independence just happened. United States were among the first and genuine, strongly supported the independence of Kosovo, and some European countries. But there were 5 European countries that hesitated to recognize Kosovo.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Why is that happening? Do we need more lobby in the EU as well?
Well, there's no question that lobbying and representation and advocacy is extremely important. But we have to recognize the reality that unfortunately, Serbia, which has a deep and culture that one wants to have respect for as well, but Serbia is very deeply involved with Germany and Russia and the Chinese, and that dynamic, it does connect it to a nuclear superpower, and we see in Ukraine the results of that, and it does illustrate the degree to which NATO's intervention and the part of the United States encouraging that was a remarkable thing in light of the fact that the nuclear situation was there. But I do believe that, I strongly believe, and in this aspect I agree with the current Prime Minister, that we need to move away from obsession about our relationships to Serbia that somehow hold us back or infringe upon us, or our relationships about who we might join or not join in the future. And we need to concentrate now on building a strong, viable economy, because the Kosovo folks, the people, the citizens, are ever more educated, ever more dynamic. the universities here, Present University, UBT, et cetera, are creating environments where the world of technology and consultancy and design, even manufacturing, this wonderful mattress company, which I'm sure you're familiar with. What is the name of that company? It's here, and let's say yesterday I went to it, and it is the finest.
Oh yeah, the company that produces the mattress.
Yes, what is it called?
It's the Volta Corporation.
What is it?
The Volta Corporation.
Volta Corporation. They have perhaps the finest factory I've ever been in my life. You could live in the factory. So the level of manufacturing, the level of engagement, Kosovo needs to deal with that issue, and not, by the way, we want to be concerned about admission to the United Nations and other things, but Kosovo can be strong just by building. I mean, if you look to the story of Israel, Singapore, Oman, for instance, other small states, Malta, these countries all have various problems that are overwhelming. In the case of Israel, neighbors that have been problematic. In the case of Malta, it being a tiny little place in the Mediterranean. By comparison, Kosovo has enormous potential, and building the economy, in my opinion, tangential with that will be building some of these relations. But there's no denying that I think we do have to be cautious, because even in the United States there can be perceptions that what the French are saying might be more important than what has been said by the Clinton administration, although we do know that Biden himself is very supportive of Kosovo, and we also know that Trump, no matter what anybody wants to say, the bottom line is President Trump brought Kosovo to the Oval Office and sat there with Serbia, and no one had done that. And just that kind of recognition adds to the story, and America is strong, very strong with Kosovo.
I would like to remain still to the independence. After declaring the independence, Kosovo started building its own institutions. How do you see, from your perspective, that period of time, the institutions of Kosovo, are they strong enough to face the reality in the international community and in international diplomacy, to face with the problems that are coming on our way, especially from Serbia and neighbors?
Look, and I don't want to speak for Jim Gemma, but I think if Jim was sitting here, he and I would both say that there was some disappointment during the post-independence period of some of the activities and problems that occurred. However, please mark this and remember this very well. After America became independent, we had, everybody forgets this, we had the Articles of Confederation for 10 or 15 years. And that was not necessarily, my tears are still coming down, that was not necessarily the best period in American history. In fact, you'll notice that in school and university, there aren't a lot of people going into too many details about that period, because the states initiated things that were not happy things. So there was a long period there of great difficulty. When a nation is born, especially the first nation to be born in Europe in, I don't know, 100 years or whatever it is, things happen. There are adjustments, there are problems, and they're going to happen. However, I think we can see that increasingly there are institutions here that are very strong. I would be very careful about duplicity and ill intent in some of these comments about, well, our institutions are too strong, can we survive, this isn't this isn't that. Darn it, you'll survive, you'll get through this, you'll become strong. Kosovo is strong, and I'm going to say we are strong, and we're going to get through this period, we're going to become stronger, and the old government who was in power had its great strengths. President Rugova, who I admired, and by the way, I'm honored to receive the Dr. Rugova Medal, which means the world to me.
We will talk about that.
Okay. All right, but I just want to say,
I'm glad that you have it with you, so we can show.
I feel like a schoolboy, a grown-up schoolboy with my medal, but the truth is Dr. Rugova represented many wonderful things, and the previous party did achieve some great things, and this new party is achieving some interesting things, and the party that's in power is willing to adjust some points of view and morph into other points of view. And I'm very impressed that the Prime Minister recently visited the United States for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the economy is key point.
Yes.
And it must grow strong.
Yes.
Must grow powerful.
Yeah.
How we are doing on that way? How do you see it from your perspective? Are we doing fine? Do we need to do more? And what can be done more in order that we can get more investors, even though from the United States or European investors?
Well, first of all, we do know that there are certain unemployment issues here, and highly increasingly educated young people with not enough employee. Although in the last year or so, there seems to have been a rather flourishing new expanding economy here. And you do have the mattress company that we were talking about, who are doing a stellar job and will be doing many, many other things. I think that that will happen. If I may humbly say that I think the more one emphasizes that the importance is the economy and not pan-Balkan nationalistic issues, because right now folks are up to here with that, and you just concentrate on it. And I think if you take 100 American companies or other companies from around the world and just let them go visit that mattress company, I mean, you've got to take people to that mattress company.
Mr. Hyland, you just mentioned that you were visiting a company. You were visiting a company of mattress, Kombëtar, and you were impressed. How important is that we have such of businesses here in Kosovo?
Well, Kombëtar is a global standard for manufacturing facilities. If in my particular personal opinion, I would be taking 100 firms from around the world and allowing them or showing them Kombëtar. Just a visit to that place is inspirational. There are aspects of that firm that are so fine from a design standpoint, the conditions in which employees are working, the facility, the architecture, the design, the textiles, the quality of the product, everything about it speaks to Kosovo excellence in every way, shape, or form. Where there is Kombëtar, there can be 100 other firms just like it. And I believe that Kombëtar does hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business, and that could be multiplied 50 times. So I have no question about the future of building viable, seriously important businesses in Kosovo. Just go to see Kombëtar, and I mean, I'd be happy to take anybody there myself. I went there last night and it was blown away, as they say.
You're a firm businessman in US, you have a company.
Yes.
Have you ever thought to come in Kosovo and invest?
Well, first of all, my textile business is a small textile business and would not be of the scale that would be suitable for a Kosovo investment story. And the real estate development company I am CEO of is 850 or so acres north of Denver, Colorado, and that is my concern and has little to do with Kosovo. However, because I wanted to somehow give something back to Kosovo, I have strongly recommended that there be, to celebrate 2023 Independence Day on February 17th, a urban planning and design conference here in the capital, which will be in tandem with a mass and concert to celebrate independence. And I hope that that conference symposium will draw together individuals who might be induced to invest in businesses in Kosovo, and I believe the Kombëtar folks will be part of that, and I would hope that a whole delegation would go there. The Diaspora Business Organization that I'm here with, as well as Vatra, who I'm here with, they are really champions and can be expanded upon as to what they can do.
We have come to a certain part of interview, and I'm going to ask in one short sentence how you would describe the political leaders of Kosovo. I would like to start with the former president of Kosovo, Mr. Ibrahim Rugova. You knew him in person. how you would describe in one short sentence him as a leader?
A remarkably profound intellectual, introducing me to Dardania and the deep history of this country and the aspirations for the future, which he was deeply committed to, and with whom I formed a great bond because he and I spoke French together. And he did not have the ability to speak with most Americans because his English wasn't that good, other than Albanian Americans. And so I would say outstanding, outstanding.
How about former President Hashim Thaçi?
I think that everybody plays their role and rises to the occasion to do the best that they can do, given all of the historic issues that are around them, and everybody, such as this individual you're talking about, deserves credit for what they did achieve and coming to the plate in difficult times during a difficult period to achieve what they did, and for which there must be respect.
Now we just come to another political leader, former Prime Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Ramush Haradinaj.
I would reply the same thing. I mean, you have to understand that these individuals all came at a period of acute transition from communism and sectarian warfare and persecution into an economy in shambles, in which all kinds of things are happening, good and bad, and they are trying to make sense of this puzzle which has been thrown on the floor, desperate pieces, with a superpower recognizing this, and they rise to the occasion and do the best they can do. And I did the best I could do for Kosovo, and they, I think, did the best they could do in the time. That they or I or anybody might have our shortcomings or not is understandable.
You just mentioned the visit of current Prime Minister, Mr. Albin Kurti, to the United States of America. He stayed there for 2 weeks, had important meetings. How do you see his work as a Prime Minister? Is he doing a good job? Is he on the right path to move forward Kosovo situation?
Well, first of all, I always remember him with his long hair, because I remember observing him when he was in jail and protesting, because remember, I always read Illyria. I mean, every week I read Illyria, and so I followed him starting quite a while ago. And I am impressed by the fact that the Prime Minister of Kosovo has made it very clear that we must do business. We must turn our attention to the economy. We cannot be held captive to narratives that limit our ability to progress and move forward. And that he visited the United States, I believe Silicon Valley and here and there, and saying, we're open for business, we want to do things, we want to employ people, we want to be part of the international economic scenario. I think that he's a young man on the move and is genuinely in love with his country and will do the very best that he can do. And I'm pumped by that. I'm excited by it.
How is he doing, and I mean how we are doing as Kosovo, to maintain the ties with the United States and the relations, and to advance more in another level of communication and relations as two independent countries that feel each other the most?
Well, the United States and Kosovo have an ongoing, remarkable relationship. I mean, the recognition that the United States gave Kosovo life, that fueled by the diaspora. And of course, there will always be issues to fine-tune and ways to improve matters, but I don't see, in my opinion, just because there might be a perception in certain quarters that certain diplomats in America might be pursuing something Macron might think is important, because we obviously know that Macron is making moves that seem to block the advancement of Kosovo. But I would not assume because I speak French or because the American Secretary of State speaks French, as I do, and I knew his father and uncle, by the way, very well. I would not assume that because there are fine-tuning experiences going on here, that there's any fundamental change in the relationship between the United States and Kosovo. Indeed, we know, and the most important thing, is that President Biden is totally committed. He was a champion of Kosovo, standing up in Congress, in the Senate, and years ago. And I believe his son has a road named after him here, which is a very powerful thing. But again, there are times one matures, one knows how better to do things. The economic development thing is an important part.
I would like to remain still to the projects that are quite important for Kosovo and the United States. One of those is the project of the gas pipeline, which Kosovo refused. How do you comment that? Is that the right thing that Kosovo institution should have done?
I am not equipped to answer that question. I am not equipped to answer that question because I personally, if I may say, I find all of the politics and geopolitical actions surrounding pipelines of all kinds, whether it's the North Sea pipeline between Russia and Germany, and the pipeline you're talking about, or the pipeline that goes through the central states of our country that's basically been shut down. I am miffed by some of the moves concerning oil, and I'm question America going off of its independence and importing Russian oil, for instance. I find that interesting. I'm, on the other hand, miffed at the United States agreeing the pipeline to Germany, and then, of course, a few months later, there's an altercation between Ukraine. And what I'm saying is this is all part of a big picture that I don't have a full handle on the whys and wherefores of this, so I'm not equipped to answer the question best that you just gave me.
I did this question because here in public opinion is created the idea that Kosovo is refusing United States. That's why I did this question. Do we have to refuse projects that come from the United States and they are offered to Kosovo people and Kosovo state? That's the point that I wanted to reach out through this question.
I think that every member of a family of democratic nations, the United States is, Kosovo is, and I'm very proud of that democracy that's taken root here. Every nation of the family of democratic nations is going to assess what is best for them, what is not best for them, and I believe that healthy disagreements that are constructive are important. Disagreements or changes in policies that might or might not be done, and I have no idea in this instance whether it was or was not, that are done in a willful manner, I would assume that there has to be some method to this particular scenario. But again, I am not equipped to be able to address that. But I can only say that I would hope that if there is mutual agreement on this that's beneficial to all parties, that one is able to move in the direction that happens. Because as you know, as a textile merchant, when I negotiate with some of my mills, the positions you take leading to the point you turn on the looms to weave go through various points. And as a result, this could all be possibly part of a whole negotiation situation that is beyond me, and I'm not equipped to say, but I can assure you of this. The American ambassador to Kosovo has an abiding respect for Kosovo. He is an expert in Balkan issues and matters, and I find him a very, very important person in understanding all that is going on.
Të dashur miq, këtu përfundon kjo pjesë e parë e konakut për sonte. Unë jë lë takim të premten e radhës në orën 22:15 në Televizionin Dukagjini dhe Gazetën Infokus me pjesën e dytë të kësaj interviste me mikun e madh të shqiptarëve Christopher Hyland, i cili po ashtu, sjell rrëfime ekskluzive dhe momente tejet interesante nga lobimi i tij dhe advokimi i tij për shqiptarët dhe çështjen e Kosovës.